Been here going on 15 years now. I wouldn't recommend any crime that would lead you in a situation like this. It sobers you. It humbles you.
Even after all these years behind bars, Terrence Ford still struggles with the life he calls hell.
It's meant to punish you psychologically, and it does it.
Other than the prison yard, this is pretty much his entire world. A 6x10 cell where days seem to blend together, and the only connection to the outside is a tiny window that's sealed shut.
Not being able to just go outside or hear a bird or see trees blowing in the wind, you know, that gets to you.
Even before arriving at Salinas Valley, a level 4 maximum security state prison, his life wasn't much better.
I remember I was 3, walking down the street by myself in my Pampers. My mother didn't even have a clue of where I was.
Born in Richmond, he grew up surrounded by gangs, drugs, and violence. It was, as he put it, the norm.
I've walked by cars and seen dead bodies just sitting in there that's been shot to death. I've walked up streets and seen dead bodies just laying on the street that I guess no one called the police to come get him.
By the time he was 18, he was already serving his first stint in prison for burglary. Then, in 2008, he held a driver at gunpoint, taking him with him. That resulted in a kidnapping charge and a sentence of 26 years to life.
Something I thought was simple turned in to be the worst mistake of my life.
According to the CDC, about 60% of adults suffer from some type of childhood trauma, compared to 97% among prison inmates. Even so, it's a topic that's rarely discussed within prison walls. But that might be changing.
Volunteers, are you ready?
Fritzi Horstman is the founder of a nonprofit called the Compassion Prison Project.
Arms out.
For the last 3 years, she's been educating officials and inmates about the long-term effects of childhood trauma.
Are you ready to face your past?
Studies have shown that early life abuse is linked to a host of psychological disorders, including depression, anxiety, and PTSD.
Being told you're not good enough by your family, being beaten up by your parents. This is damaging to not only their well-being, but their ability to perform well in school, their ability to, keep a job, to stay focused. We have more things in common than we have differences.
Horstman says she cares about these men, even though they've committed heinous crimes. She cares because she too suffered from physical and emotional abuse as a child.
I shoplifted, I sold drugs. I did things that really went against my own moral compass. We're gonna dive into your past right now. What happened to you as a little boy?
Her behavior, she says, was a direct result of her trauma, a message she's trying to pass on to the men at Salinas.
All right, guys.
Horstman starts by putting prisoners in a circle. Then she reads a set of questions from the CDC's ACE quiz, which stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences.
If a parent or other adult in the household often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or threw something at you, step inside the circle.
The rougher your childhood, the higher the ACE score.
If you often or very often felt that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, had no one to protect you, step inside the circle.
4 or more ACEs and you're at high risk for toxic stress. The likelihood of depression increases 460%. Attempted suicide, 1,220%.
Step inside the circle.
You're also 7 times more likely to go to prison.
Trauma separates us from ourselves.
No surprise, almost everyone here scores above 4. Some hit as many as 9.
That's another one.
Ford scores a 5 out of the original 10 questions used by the CDC. He scores a 7 in a second round of questions specifically designed for prisoners.
I guess you blind to trauma that you feel that you can handle mentally. So I was definitely living in blindness.
We all suffer.
Coming to terms with what they've done and why, Horseman says, helps them start the process of healing.
I can't really think of ever hearing my mom say growing up, "Son, I love you."
Reducing childhood trauma will then lower their chances of reoffending.
95% of the people in prison are going to come home someday. And do you want a good neighbor or do you want a good criminal?
For Ford, it was a moment of realization that he's not alone.
It showed that no matter what you go through, there's always someone here that has went through it with you.
Even though his road to recovery is just beginning, he's hopeful, knowing that unshackling the chains of the past is the right step towards freedom. Itai Had, KPIX 5.
I'm always pretty anxious, excited, and happy. If all of those things can be true at the same time.
As she enters a world of secured gates, endless barbed wire, and concrete as far as the eye can see, Adrienne Kennedy is reminded with every step of just how surreal her life has become.
I promised myself I would never get used to it, because I think you don't.
Adrienne's husband, Tom, is an inmate at Salinas Valley, a maximum security state prison.
You already done with work?
They were introduced by a mutual friend while Tom was serving a 52-year sentence for an assault with a firearm on a police officer. She wasn't expecting to fall in love, but she did. They married in a prison ceremony in 2018, much to her family's dismay.
My family, as soon as they found out that I was with somebody that was incarcerated, they took like 10 steps back from me.
She visits him every weekend for a few hours. Once a month, they're eligible for a conjugal or family visit of up to 40 hours in an apartment on prison grounds. But even though he's the one convicted of a crime, in many ways, she says, they're both doing time.
Every week, you're like re-traumatized because you don't know what's gonna happen. As soon as you get here, you don't know what staff is gonna be up to. You don't know if they're gonna be having a good day or a bad day.
Coping with the incarceration of a loved one can be overwhelming. The stress of supporting a family member in prison can cause lasting health issues for those on the outside. It's something Fritzy Horseman is trying to change.
We numb ourselves out because we can't stand feeling anymore.
The founder of the Compassion Prison Project, Horseman, has been helping prisoners face the trauma that landed them behind bars.
The more compassion we can bring to prisons, the better our world, because prisons are not an isolated event. The violence that happens here reverberates into our communities. This changes your brain.
Which is why
The world
today
isn't safe.
she's
There's not
focusing
enough.
not on
I'm not
prisoners,
enough.
but on their families.
I got to see the pain that they're facing every day, how much they have to drive, how stressful it is for them to walk into this environment.
Research has consistently shown that inmates are less likely to return to prison if they have close relationships with their families on the outside.
Each thing that is true for you, we take a step forward into the circle.
To that end, Horseman invited the women to participate in the same
time now
exact
that
exercise
we act
their
on it.
partners went through the day before.
If you often or very often felt that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, and had no one to protect you, step inside the circle. If you often or very often felt that no one in your family loved you,
Using a CDC quiz, Horseman helps the women assess their own childhood trauma.
step inside the circle.
When people realize they're not alone, Horseman says, they connect and start to share.
They put him in handcuffs while I was still in the vicinity. I didn't want to see that.
And that is where the healing begins.
The more we're aware of our traumas and why we're behaving the way we are, the better we can regulate our systems and create a safer society.
The fact that Adrienne participated in the circle is a huge comfort to her husband, Tom. Do you think you being here has added to her trauma?
Definitely. Definitely. But that's a strange question. That's a good question because we were both traumatized before we met each other.
That shared experience, according to Adrian, has brought them closer together and, in a way, made her feel less alone.
Knowing that he willingly participated helps me to know that the wheels are turning. If the wheels are turning, then I could possibly introduce some healing that could happen between both of us.
At the end of the day, Adrian heads home, feeling a little less burdened, knowing they've both taken a meaningful step away from the trauma on both sides of the bars. Itai Hud, KPIX 5.